Howdy, and welcome back to another edition of the Supply Chaney podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Chaney, and on this podcast, we talk to the experts in supply chain, and we talk about their upbringing, what they wanted to be when they grow up, how they got into supply chain, and today's conversation is no different, but there's a small twist to it in that it's Katie Date, who is the SVP over at Hive Group, specifically focused on the Manifest show. And I think maybe probably everyone in the industry has heard about it. But before we dig into that, I really want to kind of understand what got Katie down this pathway and into the supply chain in the first place. So with that said, Katie, can you let everyone know a little bit about who you are and what you're all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name is Katie Date. I am the Senior Vice President of Industry Relations and Strategic Initiatives at Manifest. So basically, that means I am the person that is talking to all of the shippers, the carriers, the third-party logistics providers. Those are the people that are coming and looking to connect with all of our software companies and all of the different vendors that are on the expo floor. I also look at things that could help make Manifest do different better. We have a lot of surprises coming up for 2026.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm really interested to dig into that a little bit more. But as is sort of the norm here on this podcast, is I want to really dig into who you are, as a person, the human behind Katie here. And so, can you talk a little about just like where you're from, your upbringing, kind of like what some of maybe your early work experiences were like, what you wanted to be when you grow up?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Minnesota, Mankato, Minnesota, to be more specific. So not the big city, definitely, but it is a college town that is a big hockey college. So if you like hockey, you probably know where Mankato is. But I always tell people it was a great place to grow up. Very wholesome, very Midwestern. My mom was a nurse, so I have a ton of random medical knowledge that I pull out, kind of at the best crisis moments. My dad actually worked in a candy factory, so I grew up in that like distribution center. I knew what a semi truck was, went down and was in the factory with him. So I knew about supply chain before I really knew actually
Wow.
what supply chain was.
Okay.
I have a brother who still lives in Minnesota. Most of my family still lives in Minnesota. I moved out to Boston about 15 years ago, so I currently live south of Boston on Cape Cod. I went to college at the University of Wisconsin. Really had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, but was very ambitious and like wanted to try a lot of things. So, I went to school for business and communications because, that's what's going to be useful in life.
Mm-hmm.
Or so they told me at the time. And, just started applying for internships during college, got some interesting experiences, and ended up trying out running a distribution center, local distribution center for a home improvement store after college, and got a real taste of like what a dirty factory is, but
Uh-huh.
also I recently told this story at the Women in Supply Chain Forum where I was speaking. Being a woman in a male driven industry, which at the time, like, I didn't really pay a lot of attention to. And I do a lot of speaking about women in supply chain. And it probably took me like 10 years at least into my career before I even really like noticed it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And after that experience, I entered a rotational program and learned operations, and then made my way through, a variety of different experiences where I finally kind of landed my professional role that's really shaped me, and spending almost a decade at the MIT Center for Transportation and Logistics.
All right, all right. Well, I love a good story of, hey, here's what what I thought I wanted to do. Here's my early experiences. But like you said, you got to experience like through your dad and the candy factory, you got a little bit of exposure to kind of
Yeah.
what logistics and supply chain is through that time there. Did you like work there during like summers and things? Was that like a, did you do
Yeah, I
something there
never actually like
officially?
officially worked there, but was kind of just like around
Okay.
and soaked it in. Um I was a very like entrepreneurial kind of like, weird kid in the late 80s, early 90s where I like was always trying to find like my next thing that I could make money doing. So
Uh-huh.
I was like the kid that was out there like, and I'm totally dating myself now, but they used to have these catalogs where you could go around and like sell things like wrapping paper and cards and stuff to people like literally door to door.
Uh-huh.
And I was like 12 or 13 at this point, so I couldn't like get a job somewhere else, but I did that to make money. I was always like babysitting, and just always like trying to find an angle to make as much money as possible, even though I didn't really need to. Like people, because my brother didn't actually have his first real job until after he graduated college. So people always ask me like, why were you out like trying to work at such a young age? And your brother was so just like, living it up. But that there was always just this like little spark in me that I felt like, I don't know, I had something to prove, or I don't know, something like that. So I got like a lot of varied experiences and actually thought that I was going to be a nurse like my mom. So
Yeah.
while I was still in high school in Minnesota, they have this option where you can like take college classes and like earn a skill while you're still in high school. So I actually went on and was able to do like not like RN skilled nursing, but like more of like what today would be like a home health aide type
Hmm.
work. And I was doing that like working in the emergency room, doing home visits all through like my later years of high school and into college. So while my
Okay.
friends were out like, working at the mall for, $5 an hour, because this was, was the 90s, I was making like $25 an hour working in the emergency room, which was
Oh, wow.
like Katie's making all. So like I was very money driven,
Hmm.
but then I got to college and I was kind of like, I don't want to be a nurse. I know that for sure.
Yeah.
So what do I do now? And I've always been someone who's like extremely curious and wants to like be like a collector of knowledge. And so I just started taking like lots of different random classes that all kind of fit into like a business communications degree, but always kind of gravitated towards the things that were like, I don't want to say hard work, but like hands on where you like really felt like some achievement towards it. I was never really like drawn to like a marketing business role. Operations was always kind of something that was very interesting to me. So looking back, it's serendipitous that, I kind of landed within, what's now called supply chain, but definitely it wasn't called supply chain then.
Yeah, and a little bit on the marketing kind of side of supply chain now. And so similar. I grew up on a farm out in the country, with horses and tractors, and so I very much went into supply chain myself, very much at the kind of ground level, running
Yeah.
warehouses and trucks and all that sort of stuff. And so interestingly, it's interesting to find myself on the softer side of the industry, where it's microphones and cameras and that sort of stuff. So it's fun. I think it's really great to have that foundation so that when you're having these conversations with 3PLs and folks, you've been there and done that, right? You know
Yeah.
what they're talking about.
Yeah, no, and that was extremely useful to me when I was at MIT because a lot of the other people that were at the table when we were, meeting with these Fortune 500 companies had only been in the academic setting, and I can be like, no, I've driven a forklift. No, I've actually, stood on a pick line and, built pallets of different
Yeah.
merchandise. And It just gives you like a little bit of weird credibility. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's total street cred. So let's talk, or warehouse cred. I don't know, doc cred. Let's kind of dig into how that role and kind of that transition into MIT happened. How did that occur?
Yeah, so I always tell people that I've never actually really interviewed for a role, with the exception of my very first job that I got.
Yeah.
All of the roles that I've gotten have just been through conversations. And so at that time, I was working within a consulting environment and was at MIT a lot and had met a lot of the people in different, departments at MIT, and met the folks at the Center for Transportation and Logistics. And it was really just a lot of synergy. They, at that time, were looking for someone who could bridge the gap between the research that they were doing and the corporate partners that they had, and kind of bring the two together. So that's initially what I was brought in to do. And in true fashion to my personality, I'm just naturally curious, and just, started to take on more and more roles, and was in really the ground floor of the MicroMasters program and helping to build that and bring that to corporations. So that was extremely interesting. And then kind of in the second half of my career at MIT, got the opportunity to oversee and establish some of these international centers that MIT CTL is so known for, in truly making the supply chain global. So, I got to help set up center in Luxembourg and in Ningbo, China, and, helped oversee centers in Latin America and in Malaysia and in Spain. And it really opened my eyes to the value of the global supply chain in a way that, a small town kid from Minnesota probably would have never dreamed that they would have that opportunity.
And if I'm noticing there, it looks like you were doing this throughout the COVID period, and obviously that really made some changes and waves in the world of supply chain. How did y'all kind of react to that, or if you want to say embrace or leverage it for the center?
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing that MIT CTL always did well and continues to do well today is to bring people together. So we were organizing, Zoom at that point was our best friend, and it really took a lot of the barriers that we had experienced previously of, time zones and travel out of the equation. We could bring together leaders from across the globe onto a call at a mutually beneficial time, and really exchange information. And because supply chain was the heart of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And it was a tough time, but it was also like extremely empowering. And then for me, on a personal note, I also had a child during that time.
Oh, wow.
So like being in the pandemic, having a child in July of 2020, and still trying to, keep everyone together, it was like really a character building experience, if nothing else.
Yeah. Wow. And within that time there at MIT, you focused, and it looks like you spent some time on building the women's initiative there. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about that component?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first things that I noticed when I got to MIT in 2014, that I was often the only woman at the table. And like I mentioned before, I had never really thought about it until I was sitting around a table and really, being looked to as a thought leader, and constantly either being assumed that I was the receptionist or I was the one to get coffee. And it's like, no, I'm actually the one leading this meeting. And so I started to just, be curious, and I would, when there was a woman that would come to the table, ask her about her experience. And then that kind of progressed into a survey that I did in 2015 with probably about 250 women that were part of the Supply Chain Exchange, which was the corporate outreach program at MIT, asking them about their experience. And there were kind of, I would say, 5 main themes that came out of that survey that they could attribute their success to. It was strong mentorship. It was the ability to network in ways that maybe weren't the traditional ways to network in the supply chain. It was global experience was super, super important for these women's journey. And it was the, no, I'm forgetting the fourth one. Anyways, we took those themes, and in 2017, I established a formal initiative at MIT to bring women together, and then through the generous sponsorship of Converse, we were able to do our first Women in Supply Chain Summit that really focused on those 5 themes, brought together leaders, and then had a variety of different meetings and publications that came out of that group. The pandemic happened. It kind of paused in a more outward facing way, but we were still able to bring women together. And in addition to that, during the pandemic, I got the opportunity to really dive into another research stream, and that was supplier diversity. So along with Dr. Alexis Bateman, we did some research into how companies with diverse supplier bases were able to be more responsive during the pandemic, and actually got the opportunity to publish in the Harvard Business Review, which was really an honor. And those 2 topics are still what I speak on a lot today, and actually is the way that I made it to Manifest. So that in 2023 was invited to be a keynote speaker at Manifest, met the Manifest team to talk about the research that I had done at MIT, met the Manifest team, had a conversation backstage with Courtney, who's the president of Manifest, and she's like, would you ever consider making a shift? And I was like, well, maybe, let's talk about it. And very quickly over the next 2 months, we had some conversations, and it really seemed like a great kind of transition for me. You know, I can always go back to academia, but what is being created at Manifest is something that's super special. And so the opportunity to be a part of that and leverage the contacts that I had made in the past, and to be able to really use the knowledge that I had built over my time at MIT to help make sure that this event really did capture the entire supply chain was, it was a perfect fit. And now 2.5 years later, the event has, grown more than double in size from 2023 when I spoke. We have a lot of additional areas that we're now addressing, including cold chain and procurement, and really diving deeper into sustainability. And so kind of the sky is the limit at this point. We're really capitalizing on the energy and an excitement that's in supply chain right now, and trying to continue to build on that magic.
I appreciate these milestones and these transition points in your journey where you've kind of just, it's a conversation, right? Backstage, or it's just going onto campus to take care of some other business, and kind of serendipitously building this bridge to what would become your next career step. It's a really fun way to go through a career, I would imagine.
Yeah, no, it is. But it's also hard when so a lot of what I do is mentorship for women that are coming up in the supply chain. And they're always asking me, how do I get my next job? Yeah. And it's like, I'm not the person that's going to be able to help you navigate, an applicant tracking system. But what I can do is I can make introductions for you, and I can help you practice having those conversations, because a lot of the best jobs out there are never even posted.
It's you and I we are singing from the same sheet of music on that. It's the ATS stuff. When I get asked those questions, I'm just like, get out there and go meet people. That's the secret that's the only secret I can share with you, really,
Yeah.
And make introductions. Yeah.
Yeah. And so many leaders have told me that, the best people that they've hired haven't been people that look amazing on paper. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's the people that have those kind of intrinsic, people skills, because you can teach a lot of the technical stuff, but you can't always teach someone how to be a good human, how to be empathetic, how to, be able to have a normal conversation. What is normal, but like a productive conversation, let's say
Yeah.
that. And how does that come through on paper? How does an ATS pick up on that? They don't.
Don't. Yeah, it's hard to communicate that. And now more and more it feels like, I like to call it like robot versus robot, because we have these sort of AI enhanced resumes and things. And then you've got an ATS or AI, robot there that's reading through all the applications. And so now it's like, where's the humanity and the people in this? And so I feel like the pendulum is going to swing back more into that personal connections and, IRL type of career movements.
Yeah, I hope so.
So let's talk a little bit about the origins, or the early days of Manifest. Your first interaction was in 2023. How long had it been occurring before that? Can you kind of give us from day one, what was the inspiration?
Yeah, so and I'm sure a lot of people have shared this with you before, but in 2019, my colleague Pam Simon had this small supply chain technology event that she was running in Miami. And Jay Weintraub, who is the mastermind, like our Wizard of Oz, if you will, behind the creation of Manifest, but also behind the creation of some other very successful events, started talking to her about, doing a supply chain event that fell into his kind of formula for success. And so they started having that conversation, and then 2020 happened. And so it kind of, they had hired a core team of people to work on this event. And as it happened, they worked on the event for a good period of time, with the first iteration of Manifest going live in 2022. So then in 2023, I was there as a speaker. I had the privilege of experiencing it as an attendee, and saw the real first event that happened post-COVID. Because in 2022, there was still a lot of testing that was happening. It was the height of Omicron. There were a lot of things that were happening still in 2022. So 2023 was really like when the party started. And now in 2026 we'll be in year 5, and have changed venues since then. When I spoke, we were at Caesars Forum, and now we're in the beautiful, beautiful space at the Venetian, which is gigantic. But my kind of mission is to keep the small magic that happened when we were in the smaller venue in moments. So one of the things that I do at Manifest is I put together round tables. So they're legitimate round tables where 10 people from different, kind of areas of the supply chain sit down and discuss a common topic. Roundtables were something that I did at MIT on a larger scale that were always very successful and very well received. So in the 2024 event, we tried it for the first time just with shippers. Very successful. And then last year we were able to expand it and double the number of roundtables and topics that we addressed, and bring in our sponsor companies to be able to participate in it. And we're doing the same thing in 2026. So hitting up all the hot topics. As you can imagine, a lot of the tables are focusing on AI and different applications of AI, but still digging into a lot of the other hot topics, like sustainability is still top of mind for a lot of people, as well as visibility and a lot of the other topics out there as well.
Yeah. So a moment ago, you referred to this idea of taking the supply chain topic in an event and applying it into this particular model or format that seemed to have been successful. Can you talk a little bit about what some of those elements are? I guess you don't have to share all the secrets, but what are some of those elements that make Manifest and it just feel different?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of our biggest, I think, recipes for success, and this goes back to Jay Weintraub, our kind of Wizard of Oz. He always does his events in fun places. So in the US, he does them in Las Vegas because people get to Las Vegas and they feel this sense of kind of like, like it's okay to cut loose. It's okay to have fun. And guess what? When you cut loose and you kind of let down your barriers a little bit, networking is a lot easier. So in a place traditionally, I mean, I've been to a lot of trade shows, I've been to a lot of conferences in my career, and networking in those settings is kind of like, I don't know, like unpleasant in a lot of situations because it's forced. And so the thing at Manifest that we do is we make it fun and it's not forced. It's, you meet someone standing in line to get a mocktail, or you're at the golf simulator and, you're, revving up to, I don't play golf, but to do your best shot, or whatever, but you're talking to the person next to you in line because that's naturally what you do, and your guard is down a little bit. You're not in like, ooh, I need to put on the Katie professional face. You're ready to hit your best shot in golf, or you're grabbing a fruity cocktail, or a donut with bacon, and these natural kind of organic connections happen. And I think that's some of the real magic behind Manifest. The other thing is the audience. So this is the thing that hit me from day one of being an attendee. You go to a lot of other events and you'll see just kind of one area of the supply chain. You'll see just shippers, or you'll just see people that are in the transportation space. At Manifest, you get the entire ecosystem. We intentionally really shape our audience to make sure that the investors are there, the startups are there. Yes, the shippers are there. You have your retailers, you have your brands, your manufacturers there. You have software companies, you have the logistics service providers, but we really make sure that it's a balance of all of them so that, again, serendipitously you make connections. And I think that's kind of where a lot of the magic lies.
I see. And when you're doing this, you can pick anyone can host an event in Las Vegas. That's okay, done. Table stakes sort of there. And then, getting everyone to the table, everyone from throughout supply chain there. There still must be something about maybe the people behind the curtain, right? The folks like yourself and Pam and Courtney. Can you talk about kind of like just the team dynamics and sort of just the behind the scenes of creating Manifest?
Yeah, absolutely. So I give Courtney a lot of the credit for this. She has brought together, and this is not to stroke my own ego at all, but a lot of the superstars that are really great in their particular area. So you talked about Pam. Pam is amazing at connecting with the startup and investor community. She's been doing it for years. She has those connections and she knows how to get them to the table. And then you have Dan Reese, who has been in the events industry for 20 years, mostly working in the supply chain, and has connections with every legacy carrier to up and coming software provider, and kind of everyone in between, and is able to really get them to the table. And then I don't know if you've ever talked to Tanzel, but Tanzel has these amazing connections with a lot of chief supply chain officers within the industry, and started this amazing kind of subset. Again, going back to the, Manifest is huge, but we're trying to create small little pockets of magic where people can interact with each other. And he started this leadership suite where he brings together, 50 chief supply chain officers in a room where they can connect just with each other, and has these amazing connections. And then, they didn't necessarily have the domain expertise. So then Courtney brought in me, and I have the domain expertise. I have a lot of the connections with, the Fortune 500 companies, and each person is excellent kind of in what they do, and they come with no ego. That's the other thing. So I've worked at other companies where people know that they're excellent in what they do, but they bring this like huge ego to the table, and it's impossible to work with them. My colleagues don't have ego. Like, everyone is there to do what needs to be done. So, for example, and they'll probably all kill me for sharing this, but the last few years, the Monday before we start, we are all in the plenary stage and we're putting on chairbacks. Like, what other company do you have senior vice presidents, executive vice presidents that are literally in their suits but putting on chairback covers? Like, that's kind of the, Courtney keeps us humble, but also gives us the runway to be able to create the magic.
I like that. There's one other element to this, and I'm kind of new to the conference scene. This past year, 2025 edition, was my first time at Manifest. And one thing that I picked up pretty quickly is that everyone that I seem to know and interact with on LinkedIn, kind of like all of the podcasters, all the content creators, everyone who kind of has a bit of a presence and personal brand out in the industry was there. And so it kind of just feels like it was LinkedIn Live is what I was calling it. And so is there an emphasis, I guess, on getting those people that are top voices in the industry there? It has a different feel to every other conference because it feels like everyone with a voice is there.
Yeah, and I give Courtney a lot of credit for that. So Courtney has a lot of really amazing media and association partnerships, and has over, the past 5+ years developed relationships and gone out and really, like, if she sees a gap, she goes out and she, finds someone, from that space to make sure that those voices are being represented, and she's giving them all a space in order to do their interviews and to be there. I think, a lot of other events, they don't give that space for people to be able to do, what they do really well.
I love it. As we kind of start wrapping things up here, I'm curious if you were to go back to Katie, the college student who wasn't totally sure exactly what she was going to do out there. Do you have any words of advice for that Katie?
So many. The number one thing I think, and this is something that I've developed, as I get older, is, stop caring about what other people think. Really having that strong sense of self-worth. I think a lot of the decisions that I made early on were more based on what I thought someone else was going to think, or what I should do because of what someone else thinks, and was really like super self-critical of myself. Yeah. And so I would love to go back to her and be like, you know what? Everything turns out okay. Like, you're going to do pretty well. Quit stressing about it. Yeah, I think that's what I would say.
All right. Is there anything else about the upcoming event? We're just a couple months out from now. Any other teasers or any other sort of projections? I think you mentioned at the opening of this that there's going to be some surprises. Now that everyone has made it all the way to the end of the podcast here, is there anything that you can share, or any kind of final comments for this upcoming show?
Yeah, absolutely. So there'll certainly be surprises in terms of the activations. Our expo hall is bigger than ever, so make sure that you venture into the expo hall. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I've told a lot of people is, the supply chain isn't so much about like trucks and warehouses anymore. Like, yeah, that's still super important. But one thing that you'll really see in the manifest agenda this year is that it's a lot about the intelligence that we can gain and the integration and the impact that you can make. Because tech is so prevalent in everything that we do. And companies are so focused on developing risk and resilience that you're gonna see a lot of the up and coming technology providers are really focusing on that, and AI, of course. But that's risk and resilience too, right?
Right.
And that this focus that it's just about, the logistics and the warehouses, like it's so much more than that now.
Right.
It's things are getting sophisticated, more and more sophisticated every day.
Right. Right. Well, hey,
Oh, and don't miss the after party.
yes, I saw the announcement come out the other day. Yes, I think that's one of the defining characteristics, at least for me, is I feel like a lot of conferences kind of end on a bit of a whimper. It's kind of everyone just kind of trickles out the door and all goes home and catches flights a little early and that sort of thing. And I think one of the defining characteristics is that there's this big bash at the end, and it really keeps people, I think, all the way through to the very end. Maybe that's part of that secret playbook of how to host a really attractive conference.
Yeah, it's always good to end on a high note and let loose and have just a little bit more fun in Vegas.
Yes, yes. Well, thanks for coming on and chatting with me today and sharing a little bit about your story. I really appreciated you being a little bit transparent about how you've made the different career moves and found your way to MIT and then over to Manifest. I think it's inspirational for anyone who's, not exactly sure where they're going to end up one day or where they're going to find that real passion sort of point in their career. So I appreciate you sharing that with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right. I'll see you at Manifest.
All right. Take care.